What was your first ever anime? What was the show that truly introduced you to this genre slash aesthetic of entertainment? For me, the show that served as my gateway of sorts to the wider world of anime was the Studio Bones adaptation of Atsushi Okubo's first big shonen hit, Soul Eater. Soul Eater has a special place in my heart, with both the anime and manga being a big source of inspiration for me. I own the anime on Blu-ray, own most of the Perfect Edition volumes, and reread or rewatch the series once every couple years. Soul Eater isn't special to only me. To this day, I see people talk about Soul Eater, still asking for an anime remake in the wake of Fire Force Season 3 on the horizon. Since I've returned to Soul Eater so many times, my feelings towards it have naturally changed. Some things I hold in higher regard than before, while other aspects I've soured on. I mean, obviously, right? Of course, the me of 2025 will think differently of the series compared to 2013 me. I always wanted to do a video on Soul Eater and my experience with it. That's why soon after starting my YouTube channel, I set the goal to make this video after reaching 1,000 subscribers. Due to wanting to wrap up other projects first though, we have a few other milestones to celebrate with this video. Thank you for the continued support, by the way. Also, this video is coming out on my birthday! Yes, when you're watching this, I'll be 22 years old, so leave your birthday wishes in the comments below. Anyway, hello, I'm Shiro. Welcome to the Matsunoki Cafe, a gathering place for all kinds of people. I hope you stick around and listen to my diatribe about what Soul Eater as a series means to me. By the way, just to get out of the way, I've written this video under the presumption you've seen or read Soul Eater. If you care about spoilers, save this video to your watch later and go read the manga. Okay, back to the video. Any good retrospective type video starts by providing context. And what better context to provide with something like Soul Eater than an introduction to its mangaka, Atsushi Okubo. To put it bluntly, this man was an underdog in the manga industry starting out. Before becoming a mangaka, he was far from a model student. He's admitted in interviews how he didn't like school and struggled with it a lot. However, around the same time, he discovered his talent in drawing, and so, after attending art school, he ended up becoming an assistant to Rondo Ayamine, the illustrator of Get Backers and the creator of Holy Talker. With his foot now planted in the manga industry, it wouldn't be long until Okubo had his chance at serializing his own series. Square Enix, yes, that Square Enix, was the one to give Okubo that chance, bringing his debut series to life within the pages of their manga magazine, Monthly Shonen Gangan. Okubo's first ever manga series was B-Ichi, following a boy named Shotaro who could gain the power of any animal after biting on their bones. B-Ichi would go on to last less than a year before coming to an abrupt end. I'm not going to give a detailed summary on why B-Ichi got canned. This isn't an autobiography of Okubo's life. I'm just merely setting the stage for what was to come. And that was a strange fusion of anime tropes, Tim Burton as Halloween aesthetic, graffiti style art, and Harry Potter. Remove the bigotry from that franchise's author, and what you get is a manga unlike any other from the time it was made, and still to this day. Soul Eater. Soul Eater started out with 3 one-shot chapters that would later go on to become the full series' prologues. Those prologues centered around specific groups of Meisters and Weapons who would be our ensemble of protagonists. These combat-ready teenagers are students of the Death Weapon Meister Academy, a school run by the actual Grim Reaper. Magic schools are a dime a dozen in the world of anime. One of the most mainstream anime out there is about teens going to a school for superheroes, for example. It's not just anime either. As I said, one of the inspirations for Soul Eater was Harry Potter, and that series' main setting of Hogwarts most definitely inspired the DWMA. But that's just the thing. Okubo's major inspirations for Soul Eater were stuff that originated outside of Japan, contributing to why there's no other anime quite like it. The American setting of this series as a result of such creative influences, DWMA and Death City, where the main cast all live, aren't set in Japan or a fantasy land. It's smack dab in goddamn Nevada. Soul Eater's world may seem fantastical, but it's meant to be a bizarre alternative version of our reality where the sun and moon look like this. It feels like every season of the year comes with like 20 plus different anime, but none have come close to replicating the captivating gothic ambience of Soul Eater. From the very beginning, Okubo did a splendid job of crafting a setting that was chaotically fun and drenched in gothic culture. Alongside the locales, many of the characters play into this Halloween vibe too. In the first proper arc, Maka, Soul, Blackstar, and Tsubaki are tasked to fight one of their teachers who's become a zombie, and then fight a mad scientist named Frankenstein. Soul Eater is very upfront about its macabre origins. But for as much as the world of Soul Eater is cool and interesting to explore, it can at times be pretty horrific. I know people often cite how Tim Burton's works served as inspiration for Okubo, but I feel it goes relatively unnoticed how he was inspired by another American filmmaker, David Lynch, the man who made such surrealist horror classics as Eraserhead and Twin Peaks. Soul Eater is first and foremost a shonen battle series, but it's not afraid to dive into surrealist horror at times. Now, don't get me wrong, it's not all that scary. I'm certain if I were to try claiming Soul Eater was one of the scariest anime/manga out there in the year 2025, y'all would hit me with the SpongeBob roller coaster meme so fast. But genuinely, as a 10-year-old kid who was a total scaredy cat, a lot of these more horror-filled scenes in the anime spooked the hell out of me. You can directly see the surrealist side of Soul Eater's world in some of its more out-there designs. In chapter 41, shortly after the point in which the anime and manga begin to diverge, we see the first of many clowns in the series. And look at this ugly-ass thing. The way its misshapen body's primarily made of what looks like organs, topped off with that creepy clown mask, makes this thing look so damn sinister. Later on in the series, Okubo starts drawing inspiration from Lovecraftian mythology, adding this level of cosmic horror as the characters learn more about and experience the different types of madness and the great old ones. That's not to mention the many moments of body horror sprinkled throughout the story, most of which involve crona. The art in general starts pretty good and only gets better with every few chapters. As I described in my video on catching up with modern shonen titles, Okubo's general art style is this blend of the usual anime look and graffiti. Take a look at some of the color pages for this series and you can already see what I mean. I don't live in a big city, but in the times I've been to big cities, I've seen graffiti reminiscent of this kind of stuff all over the place. That isn't to mention certain design choices that Okubo has always had, whether it be giving a prominent character shark teeth, giving characters unique pupils, constantly contorting faces and anatomy for either comedic or surrealist means, and that goddamn moon. I kid you not, this moon design has been here since chapter 1 of BEG. This grinning crescent moon is practically Okubo's signature. The best example of Okubo's artistic evolution with this series are chapters 4 and 95. During one of the final arcs, Maka locates Crona at the church where they first met. This pair of pages are meant to call back to the pages of that initial meeting. You can see how much Okubo's art has improved in the span of a decade plus making Soul Eater. The further amount of detail and overall polish in the characters and backgrounds is plain to see when I put the two side by side. That isn't to say the early art of Soul Eater is bad by any means. It still does a decent job of conveying emotion from character expressions, and I'd argue the simple, almost warped looking backgrounds do add to the surrealist elements of the series. I will say though, I am glad he improved on drawing the characters. Overly sharp angle Soul does not look right to me, I'm sorry. I know I've mainly been talking about the manga, but I will say the anime designs for everyone struck a good balance of maintaining the unique style of Soul Eater, while refining their designs to be more generally appealing. Studio Bones' work in general, at least from what I've seen, puts priority on the art style and art direction of an anime, which ends up making a lot of their work age like fine wine, well after they come out. Reminder that the anime started airing in Japan in 2008, and a couple weeks after this video comes out, it will be 17 years since the first episode was released. It's astounding how good the anime still looks to this day when you keep that in mind. Now, it being animated and in color are things that subjectively put the anime over the manga, depending on the person, but one thing the anime has over the manga almost objectively is the inclusion of music. I say that because of how important the concept of music and sound is to Soul Eater as a series. Okubo loves music, and you can see that love put on display throughout the entirety of Soul Eater. The character Soul comes from a family of musicians and has a passion for it, and his usage of his black blood involves playing the piano in his mind to essentially cast buffs and debuffs. The concept of sound is a key element of Soul Eater's power system, that being soul wavelengths. In Chapter 2, Lord Death compares the bond of Meister and weapon to an electric guitar and an amp. A person's wavelength is their soul's rhythm. A weapon amplifies the Meister's wavelength, giving them a boost in power. A major technique Meister weapon duos use is soul resonance, literally matching the frequencies of each other's wavelengths to keep amplifying one another and perform super moves. We also see exceptions to this general bond through multiple characters, like how Stein and Blackstar are so in tune with their soul wavelengths that they can amplify and output it all on their own. Later, we meet Justin Law, a Death Scythe who's the weapon equivalent of the two I mentioned prior, being able to amplify his wavelength without the need for a Meister. Chapter 3 makes a clear case that soul wavelengths are the most important factor in the compatibility between Meisters and weapons. For context, it's the battle Kid and the Thompson sisters have against Blackstar and Soul. Kid, Liz, and Patty have a mutual admiration for one another, thus their souls can easily harmonize and Kid can competently use their twin gun forms. On the flip side, when Soul transforms into his full scythe form, Blackstar can't even lift him up. It's a funny gag in the moment, but it's the first of multiple instances that display how important the compatibility of Meister and weapon are. Blackstar and Soul, for as much as they get along, ultimately aren't a good pair in combat. They need their respective partners to rein them in and cover for them in areas they lack. The bond between Meister and weapon isn't about hyping one another up, it's about meeting in the middle to bring the best out of each other. So yeah, there's my tangent on the hidden depth of Soul Eater's power system and its ties to music. Anyway, onto the point I was getting at when I started this segment. The composer for Soul Eater, Taku Iwasaki, understood the assignment. He cooked with this OST. Multiple characters get their own theme songs, the hip hop and grunge rock perfectly complement the setting. Also Lotus Juice. Lotus Juice raps on a few tracks, and if you play Persona 3, then you know him being involved guarantees an OST is absolute peak. If Soul Eater ever does get a Brotherhood type remake, I would like it if they push this strong ties to music even further by giving every major character their own little sound cue whenever we see their soul, or have them pull off a move involving their wavelength, but maybe that's too much to ask for. Speaking of the characters, I want to start talking about them now. First off, every character design, from the recurring cast to the side characters, is oozing with style. Okubo has always been a master at character design, and the Soul Eater cast are a great showcase of his talent. To provide a couple examples, Maka's formal attire, with the tie and the vest, visually communicate how she's studious and mature for her age. The long black coat she wears looks so big on her, signifying how her insecurities make her feel so small in comparison to her rather lofty goal of making Soul a Death Scythe. In stark contrast, you have Soul. Soul's main character trait is he's a chill guy that low-key doesn't give a fuck, and you can tell by his attire. Dude consistently has the most casual and comfortable clothes from the first prologue to the final chapter. And thus, when you put the two side by side, you can visually deduce that they have an opposites attract kind of dynamic. My favorite character in all of Soul Eater, who just so happens to be the big fan favorite in Japan, is Death the Kid. His most prominent character trait is his obsessive fixation on symmetry and balance, and again, it's communicated so well in his appearance. His design is so good that Megan Thee Stallion cosplayed him a few years back, and also me. Also, to deviate a bit from one specific character, the cast of Soul Eater is pretty diverse in terms of race and culture. We see that in the various death weapons from across the globe to the handful of dark-skinned characters present in the anime and manga. Yeah, we have actual prominent black characters in Soul Eater, and this isn't a one-off thing. Okubo introduces black characters in all his manga, from Biichi's No Fix to Fire Force's Hibana and Charon. Yet another reason Okubo is the GOAT. I could go on about every major character's various designs, but I'll hold myself from gushing for hours and only talk about one more. Crona's pink hair, particularly their bangs, is cut very sloppily, conveying how much of an emotional wreck they are throughout the series, constantly thinking negatively after being abused for a majority of their life. Their long robe conveys how introverted and closed off they tend to be, as well as emphasizing their androgyny. Their androgynous appearance is crucial, as it was always originally intended that Crona never be referred to by gender-specific pronouns, something that unfortunately was absent when the original manga translation and the English dub of the anime used he, him for Crona. If you don't believe me, Okubo literally said on Twitter in 2015 that Crona's gender is unknown. And as someone who realized they were non-binary through relating to Crona's quirks, yeah, Crona has a very soft spot in my heart, alongside like over half of the major characters from the series. That's the next thing I want to touch on, Okubo's methods of plot progression and character writing as seen in Soul Eater. At the end of every volume across all his series, Okubo draws a fictional version of himself as an usher of a bar called Atsushi. It's an afterword where he and his assistants joke around and draw whatever they feel like. The few times where Okubo uses this afterword to give some insight into the development of Soul Eater really helped in writing this video. In the Atsushi Volume 20, he describes his mindset in writing character development. I was of the opinion that, at the time, there were way too many manga where the characters were developed through flashback scenes and elaborate backstory. So with Soul Eater, I wanted to try writing a story about the characters in the here and now without taking that past referencing approach. He went on to say that he wanted to keep Soul Eater simple so that the big themes wouldn't get drowned out by superfluous and finicky details. And did Okubo succeed in making compelling characters through his more present-focused approach? Yes, undoubtedly so. To this day, the characters of Soul Eater remain one of the most charismatic in all of shonen. I've read shonen series that use flashbacks and backstories as a huge crutch to give their characters even the slightest bit of nuance or intrigue. But Soul Eater takes the direct opposite approach to excellent effect. In the times where we do get a flashback sequence, it's brief and only used to provide context. In Soul Eater, every character is interesting from their personalities and interactions with each other alone. And that's a big feat for Okubo to accomplish when you remember there are 7 protagonists this series juggles between. Not to mention the teachers and other students of DWMA and many of the antagonists. There's a reason that to this day there are people who remember these characters, making fan art or cosplaying them. Not only because of their stellar designs, but also because they're well-written characters. Soul Eater is a great showcase of how a deep or tragic backstory isn't required for a character to be compelling. As long as you can give them a charming personality and fun dynamics with other characters, you're set. This focus on the present events helps the narrative progression. You can clearly chart every step of a character's development from the start of the manga to the end. The flow from one arc to the next feels so natural and seamless. Soul Eater does a lot in its 113 chapters. But every story and character moment feels earned due to its great pacing and excellently handled characters. Sadly, due to the anime's deviation from the manga, it misses out on a lot of important characterization for the major cast. While what did get adapted from the manga was still good, it feels a little half-baked because of the rushed conclusion. The salvage arc that happens in the second half of the manga has so many pivotal moments of development for so many of the main 7. Maka and Soul being hit with their greatest insecurities and strengthening their resolve to support each other. Black Star and Kid finally reaching a level of catharsis in their friendship. On top of that, it's also this arc that starts bringing focus to the secondary theme of Soul Eater as a series, the passing of the torch from one generation to the next. A theme that becomes super important in the short witch trial arc, where Kid comes face to face with the consequences of his father's actions for the past 8 centuries. The mere idea that there are people who have only watched the anime and have missed out on the salvage arc, the war on the moon, as well as the manga Baba Yaga arc, which has the best fight in the series, makes me so sad, man. The character who was hit the hardest by the arcs left out of the anime was none other than the main character herself, Maka Albarn. Maka is pretty likable from what we got in the anime, but I believe seeing her anxieties and personal issues during the salvage arc really helps in giving us a full picture of who she is. It's put on display how much Maka struggles to understand any interest outside of reading, and gets jealous when other people are able to relate and understand Soul's interests in things like music better than she can. She wants to be able to relate to Soul's love for music, but struggles immensely to do so. Maka's social awkwardness and envy are character flaws that I, and probably a lot of other people, can definitely relate to. I guess you could say Maka's character growth really resonated with me. That's why it's so nice to see her and Soul forge a close partnership regardless of their mutual low self-esteem by covering where they individually lack. They learn to rely not just on one another, but on their friends and allies. By the end of the series, Maka and Soul have the courage to embrace that they don't need to be the strongest or the best at something, and that it's totally okay to be weak and rely on others. It's a moral that's helped me a lot, and one I need an occasional reminder of every time I rewatch or reread this series. And that's also why it's so bullshit that Maka almost single-handedly beats and kills Asura while the manga has all 7 protagonists work together in unison to deal the final blow. Okay, I'm gonna stop there. This is meant to be a positive video. Deep inhale, deep exhale. Well, I do think Okubo is a bit too trigger happy with fan service, not only in Soul Eater but in all his manga, I have to give him props for how well developed and compelling the female cast of Soul Eater is. I'm not going to go in depth on why the female cast of Soul Eater is great, as I've already gone on long enough talking about the characters in general. Suffice to say, like the male cast, they're great. I also have to give Okubo props for having the main character of Soul Eater, a battle shonen series, be a girl. I understand why there aren't a lot of female leads in shonen. I mean, the target demographic is in the name. Shonen translates to young male. But this is another aspect that makes Maka unique. She is a badass female fighter who, while not the strongest of the three Meisters, is no less competent than either of them. The only battle shonen manga I can think of with a female lead are Dandadan, JoJo's Part 6, and that one candy manga that got axed super quickly into its run. That wasn't a fever dream, right? Other people remember that manga existing, yeah? Fading of their status as the main duo, Maka and Soul's development directly coincides with the biggest theme of Soul Eater as a series: courage and fear. Near the end of the final saga, I was getting pretty worried that the shift to focusing on the battle between order and madness would directly go against the simplistic storytelling Okubo had been aiming for so far and muddle the other themes. But then partway through, it became pretty clear what Okubo was going for in this philosophical conflict. Order and madness weren't two concepts totally separate from courage and fear. They were used as synonyms. Same with connection and isolation. The Kishin Asura, the final enemy of the series, is the embodiment of fear. One of the first things we learn about him is that he was so afraid of his weapon partner that he consumed their soul. And when he was released from a seal, he immediately cowered away to the moon, not physically showing up again until the finale. While Maka and Soul are the poster children for this overarching theme, there's one more character who directly plays into this duality of courage and fear. A character who brilliantly showcases the unique storytelling of Soul Eater, Crona. In the anime, their plotline of gaining the support system and staying up for themselves against an abusive parent is decent if a bit generic. But then you see how their character progresses in the manga. Chapter 87. Just a simple story about killing a person. In this chapter, we see Medusa finally show Crona a shred of kindness. Crona rejects that kindness, being disgusted by it, and proceeds to kill their own mother. Crona screams about how Medusa couldn't suddenly be nice to them after they threw away everything for their mother. You don't get to keep your love. Well, I don't have mine. And thus, after abandoning Maka and the DWMA, after killing their mother, Crona was alone. With their cogs so out of sync to the grander machine of the world, they naturally became consumed by madness. What saved Crona in the end was their friendship with Maka, the first genuine connection they made with another person. The first person who ever treated Crona like a real human being and not a tool for some grander goal. That bond is what gives Crona the courage to find some peace of mind and help her friends seal away Asura, to overcome the fear he represents. Crona is the direct inverse of Maka in pretty much every way. While Maka is looking for courage, Crona is walking headlong into a life of constant fear. But that's why their friendship is paramount. That's why it's their bond that ends up saving the world. Giving into fear results in a maddening, solitary existence. Humans can't live like that. Soul Eater's biggest message is for people to find the courage to connect with others and achieve a sense of personal order. True greatness can only be achieved if we forge those close bonds and find bravery through each other. A message that remains mostly intact in the anime original ending. A message that an extremely introverted 10-year-old me definitely needed back then. And returning to Soul Eater again this time around, it truly hit me how much time has passed. I'm 22. I'm far from the boy who happened to catch an episode of this show while staying up late one Halloween night. If it wasn't for that chance encounter with the series, I wouldn't have the same artistic and creative mindset I do now. I remember wanting to be as cool as Soul when I first saw this show. I, failed miserably at that, but that doesn't matter right now. I'm way more critical of the media I consume nowadays, in part because I myself am an author. When I experience other people's creative works, I can't help but analyze what that story does right and where it stumbles so I can learn from it while crafting my own fictional tales. I've returned to Soul Eater, both anime and manga, countless times. Each time I've been more critical of it than I was before. I've rewatched and reread it so many times that it's impossible for me to have nostalgia blindness. I can see the areas in which Soul Eater isn't as perfect as my child self thought it was. Soul Eater undoubtedly has its flaws, like any story does. We as humans aren't perfect, and thus nothing we create can be perfect. But Soul Eater is a case where the sum of a creative work is greater than its individual parts. Pretty fitting for the theme it preaches. In spite of their flaws, I continuously enjoy Soul Eater and Okubo's other works because their charm is everlasting. I'm guaranteed to have a blast whenever I turn on an episode or open a volume of Soul Eater. When I do, I can't help but feel nostalgic, thinking back to how I enjoyed the series even more when I was a kid. But from that same nostalgia spawns a bittersweet feeling. It's been 12 years since I was introduced to Soul Eater, and through it, introduced to anime. The classmates I had back in elementary school, I don't keep up with any of them anymore. We've all gone our different ways, something that just happens while growing up. I've met a lot of people throughout my life that I don't see much, if at all, anymore. Some connections tend to waver over a long period of time. That fleetingness of bonds can make some fearful to forge relationships with others, but if I've learned anything from Soul Eater, it's to never let such fear hold you back. Through the connections we make, we gain the courage to connect with even more people. While I don't stay in contact with many people I knew when I was a kid, those bonds helped me find the courage to improve socially and make new friends. The people I know and interact with now, they're the strongest bonds I've made in my whole life. Bonds that I believe will stand the test of time. If it weren't for Soul Eater, I wouldn't know how important it is to accept my weaknesses and be courageous enough to ask others for help. Damn, we veered into such serious territory that I'm not sure how I'm going to segue into my outro here. Excalibur, Excalibur. Thank you for watching this whole video, and of course, thank you once again from the bottom of my heart for getting this channel to 1,000 subscribers and then some. Whether your contribution to the channel's growth was big or small, even a single comment helped the channel grow to the point it's at now. It sort of worked out that I was able to get this milestone video out right on my birthday. In case I didn't make it clear enough already, Soul Eater means a lot to me. So I was very happy to have this opportunity to talk about some of the reasons why, and on such an important day as well. I'm in the camp who would love to see Soul Eater get remade in a similar vein to Fullmetal Alchemist Brotherhood. And I hope they can do what FMAB and the more recent Bleach 1000-Year Blood War arc did in getting back as many of the original cast from both dub and sub as possible. As for where to go from here, like I said, I hope to reach 2,000 subscribers this year. When we do reach that subscriber count, I want to talk about my absolute favorite manga of all time, Tokyo Ghoul. So, if you want a Tokyo Ghoul video, get me to 2,000 subscribers, please. And hey, if the video does, like, insanely well, like 4K views in a month, maybe I'll make videos on Soul Eater 9 and Fire Force in the near future. Only time will tell. Speaking of time, if you've been with my channel for a while, you may know the channel anniversary is a few days away. I'll release a shorter update video to celebrate the anniversary, plus answer some questions you guys left on my Q&A posts on the community tab and on Twitter. So make sure to check it out if you want to see those questions be answered or know the trajectory of this channel's content for the next year. In the meantime, general YouTuber stuff, please consider leaving a like and comment to help this video survive a never-ending battle between me and this website's algorithm. Until we meet again, thank you for coming by the Matsunoki Cafe. Stay safe out there, and remember, a sound soul dwells in a sound mind and a sound body.